Welcome back to Kiss the Badge, the podcast that plays football with its collar up, its chest out, and with football heritage as its sleeve sponsor. My name is Ash, and we are back for another pod. Thank you so much for coming back, and thank you as well for bearing with me. I've been off for a couple of weeks. We've missed a couple of weeks of pods. It's not for want of trying. There's been a lot going on in my sphere of my part of the world, if you like. Lots of family things going on, lots of stuff happening with different friends of ours, lots of work things happening as well with me personally. I have a day job that got particularly busy over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks or so, with lots of stuff happening as well. So thank you for your patience. I really do appreciate it. The goal is to do this every week, but sometimes life takes over, and I'm sure you can understand that. It happens to the best of us, doesn't it? So apologies for that, but we are now back. And a lot has happened in the world of football since we last spoke. I'm not a football news pod, as you know, but we should touch on a few things, particularly the fact that Manchester United somehow are still unbeaten in 2026. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I certainly didn't. I don't think Michael Carrick even saw that coming. It's not even that they're playing particularly incredibly in every game. They are playing better than they were under Amorim and Fletcher as well. I can't really include Fletcher in that. It was only a 2-game interim. But under Amorim had long enough to prove himself, and they didn't look great under him. But Carrick's come in, things look good. And as I said, it's not that they're world beaters every game, but they are finding a way to get results. And that is, I can't say the sign of champions. Although, are we allowed to say that Manchester United are in a title race? Because for me, they kind of are. They're not going to win the league. Let's just put that out there. This isn't me as a United fan saying, "Come on, I think we're in a title." We're not. It's not a title race. But is it? They're not a million miles off City, and City are in a title race. So who knows? Stranger things have happened in football. Leicester City winning the Premier League, that was pretty odd, but it happened. Are Manchester United in a title race? Let me know. And again, just to be really clear, I don't actually think they are, but they are in a race for Champions League, and who saw that coming? Last season they finished 15th. 15th. This is Manchester, there's that old cliche. This is Manchester United we're talking about, and they finished 15th last season. This season they might do something, And it's helped that they haven't had a barrage of games to get through. They've been one game a week. It's been a fairly settled 11 recently. Who knows? They're looking up the table, and that's all you can do. The United strand. Poor old Frank. He was so close. He was so close. That draw against West Ham. If only when he started this, he said 5 games unbeaten. He would have done it. The Sesko goal, what a goal that was, by the way. But the Sesko goal against West Ham would have done it for him. But instead, back to 0. They're on 2 again now. They might do it this season. For me, I will say this. The clip from this podcast that got the most views out of anything I've done on this entire pod was me talking about the haircut. I said that when they did it, they should get Ruben Amorim in to cut the hair. That clip got 3.5 million views on TikTok and several 100,000 views on Instagram and YouTube. It was a popular clip. I stitched myself up a little bit because I said that it was going to be Amorim, and I had the same comment from many of you thousands of times saying, "Oh, you really think it's going to be Amorim, mate? He's going to be gone." You were right, I was wrong, but I will say this. I think Michael Carrick might be the guy to do it. 5 games under Carrick, I think it can be done, and I think it could be done this season. United are on 1 game a week. Everybody, all their rivals, everybody else is playing 2, in some cases, maybe even 3 games a week. United are on 1 game a week. They could do it this season under Michael Carrick, but I do think they will do it under Michael Carrick, whether it's this season or next. Clip it up, it might happen. Arsenal look like they bottled it for a bit against Wolves, but they're back in form again now. They beat Chelsea yesterday. So, at the moment, they're at the top of the tree. They're the team to beat. City have a game in hand, and they still have to play Arsenal as well, so it's not done. If you were asking me for my prediction now, I think Arsenal are going to bottle it. And a lot of people have asked me, because I am a Manchester United fan, people have asked me, do I want Arsenal or City to win the league? The truth is, I don't want either of them to win the league. So making that choice, it's like Sophie's choice. But if I had to pick, and this is a controversial thing to say, because people will think that I will say Arsenal, because Arsenal have done it the right way. They've built a club from the ground up, all that kind of stuff. Yes, they have money, but there's no oil millions like there is with City. So people would think, and also, I'm a United fan. Would I really want City to win the league? The answer is, given the choice of Arsenal and City, I am tempted to say I would rather City win it. And let me explain why. A lot of what City are now, and this wasn't always the case, they were a real club. But City as they exist now, it's not real. It's just, it feels like a Disneyland club in that everything has been manufactured and micromanaged to within an inch of its life and geared towards only winning and only success. And, that has come at a cost of the integrity of the Premier League. Those charges are there. They say 115. We think it's more. It's more likely to be around the 130 mark. 130 charges. For me, it can't be wrong. That can't be wrong. There's got to be some truth in that. They say there's no smoke without fire. I mean, I acknowledge that Man City existed before Sheikh Mansour, but as they exist right now, if even 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 of those charges are proven or are upheld, then it's all fake. And so for me, if Man City win another league, to me, it doesn't matter. I know the charges and all of that debate doesn't cover the current period that we're in now, and it stops around the, 2019, 2020 mark? But anything that follows that, if they get found guilty, it's all fake. So for me, one day this title that they'll potentially win this season won't count. And then you're looking at, do we really want Arsenal fans to be celebrating a title? I don't. I know a lot of Arsenal fans, and they would never let me forget it if Arsenal won a title. So I think, I'm sure not all Arsenal fans are like this. My brother-in-law's an Arsenal fan. He's a great guy. But a lot of Arsenal fans, and particularly the Arsenal fan base online, kind of irritating. So for me, although I don't want either of them to win it, I'm erring towards City. Don't come for... I know you will, but don't come for me. On the back of that controversial statement, let me give you a shout out to my socials. I would really appreciate... I'm not going to get a lot of follows after saying that, am I? Particularly from Arsenal or City fans, maybe even United fans. But please do get involved with the social media on this channel. That is the only way that this channel grows, And for me, where I'm at in life right now, I'd love to do more of this. I would love... if something like this was a day job. And I know we're a long way away from that right now, but you never know. All those things, all those podcasts that you listen to, I love the Football Cliches podcast, those types of things. It starts small. It has to start small. And so I'm starting small right now. I'm filming in my house. I've got a very basic setup, a basic mic, but a lot of you are enjoying it. So if you are enjoying this content, please do subscribe, particularly via Spotify and YouTube. Those are the two platforms on which you can, or most people are listening to the full version of the pod. Of course, there are clips that go out via social media, and the platform handle for those is @KissTheBadgePod. So do get involved on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube @KissTheBadgePod. And for Spotify, it's just Kiss the Badge. So get involved. I would love you to come along on the journey. I don't know where this is going to end up. Maybe it'll be a job one day. Maybe this will lead to other opportunities, but I love doing it. I love reminiscing about the good old days in football. We've just talked a little bit about football news. I'm actually not a football news podcast. I'm a nostalgist, if that's even a word. That's what I am. It sums me up well. So I like to look back at the good old days, not just of Manchester United. Everyone says United fans are stuck in the past. I am a little bit stuck in the past, but not just as a United fan. I think football was better back in the day. I make no secret of that. Football now is what it is. It's changed. It's different. It's still good, but it's not as good for me as it once was. And that is what this podcast is all about, looking at the good old days, and particularly looking at the good old shirts, the good old memories, the good old goals, just the good old times, really. So get involved with that @KissTheBadgePod and subscribe, because the more of you that do that, the bigger the pod gets and the more chance this actually goes somewhere. So get involved. I'd love you to join me. Right, now we come to a section of the pod called Shirt Sponsor of the Week. And this week's shirt sponsor of the week is, who else? Flamingo Land. Proud sponsor of Hull City from 2015 to 2016. This, weirdly, is not the only instance of a football club being sponsored by a theme park. Blackpool were, of course, sponsored by Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the 2024-25 season. It was also a one-season deal. So it's not the only instance of a theme park getting involved in the football shirt sponsorship game. Weirdly, this theme park, they sponsor Hull City. Flamingo Land is not even in Hull. It's actually closer to Middlesbrough. So is this an instance of Flamingo Land getting involved in sponsoring their local rivals? I suppose it is. Flamingo Land is an interesting, theme park. They brand themselves as a theme park, and it's still going now. It's actually not the weirdest theme park I've ever heard of, though. And I can tell you that because I grew up in North Devon and we had some absolute humdingers. The Milky Way, I used to go there quite a lot. That was near Clovelly. And they had a theme park there called the Milky Way. It was sort of galaxy themed, and again it's still going now, and you can go there, and they kind of had everything from birds of prey, death slides, ball pits, zip lines. I think they had a driving range and like a 9-hole pitch and putt there. What else did they have? A roller coaster for a little. Oh, they had dodgems for a little while. I don't know, 2000s kids among you will remember Merlin from Britain's Got Talent. Merlin worked there as their sort of resident strongman for a little while, piggybacking off of that Britain's Got Talent fame. And he was quite a big draw for quite a long time. Another one, I used to love the Milky Way, by the way, but another big one in the local area, this is even better, near where I grew up, near Bideford, the town of Bideford, there was a theme park called The Big Sheep. The Big Sheep. That was the name of the theme park. They had death slides again. I remember there being a little shop that sold sort of farm produce, a cafe. I think they had one roller coaster. But of course, they're called the Big Sheep. This is in farming territory. They had sheep racing. And I don't know if you can see that anywhere else in the world. Maybe you can. I don't know. I've just sort of made that up. But they did have sheep racing. So actually, Flamingo Land, compared to the Big Sheep, it's quite normal. I mean, Flamingo Land, they were named that because when they opened, they had some flamingos there and they were popular. And so they named the whole place Flamingo Land. So it was actually opened as a zoo, but everyone just really liked the flamingos, so they called it Flamingo Land. They have roller coasters there as well, and they have one that has 10 inversions. That's quite extreme. And they also had one, which until recently was the world record holder for the steepest drop on a roller coaster. So, they're not messing about at Flamingo Land. They got the big hitters. Flamingos and world record-breaking roller coasters. What more do you want? They are a zoo as well. That's their bread and butter at Flamingo Land, animals. And they've got them there. They've got lions. They've got giraffes. I've never been. This is all just from the website. But they've got lions. They've got giraffes. They've got hippos. Is it hippos or hippo? Is the plural of a hippo? Hippo. I don't know. Doesn't really matter, does it, to be honest? This is a football podcast. And of course, one animal that they would have to have, being the sponsors of Hull City, they've got tigers. I love these types of sponsors, I've got to say. I think the day of local sponsors, sadly, is sort of dying out now, particularly in top flight football. You sometimes see it in the lower leagues, but in top flight football, when was the last time we had a Flamingo Land sponsoring a football club? I just love it. And that's why I wanted to talk about this one as well. Those types of sponsors, you don't get them in football. It's a proper throwback sponsor, this. 2015 to 2016, they were sponsored by Flamingo Land, Hull City. The following season, of course, a gambling sponsor took over, because that is what's happening to football shirts in football these days. It's all gambling sponsors and airlines. And that's not as inventive. If anybody from a marketing firm or, a marketing department of a football club is watching this or listening to this right now, hit Flamingo Land up. It's so much more interesting than Emirates or, Betfair. So there we go, Flamingo Land. It's random, but at least it's not a gambling sponsor. Right, let's talk about France 98 again, because I just feel like there's so much to say. One thing I do want to say, it was my first World Cup, so I'm always going to have that sort of personal affinity with it. Some people have it with Italia 90, USA 94. They were all special World Cups for different reasons for different people. France 98 was my first, and so that's why I love to talk about it. you always remember your first, don't you? You know, it's true of many things, World Cups being one of them. And so that's why I want to talk about it today. We can question whether or not it was the best World Cup. You know, I feel like there's a debate to be had there. But one thing I don't know if we can question is whether or not France 98 was the World Cup with the best football shirts. Because I think that's not a matter of opinion. That is a fact. You know, shirt manufacturers were still being very creative with the shirts back then. The era of the template had not really kicked in just yet. It was coming in, but I feel like there was still quite a lot of creativity in that space. Manufacturers were doing different things with the shirts. Shirts were unique. They were creative. They had a creative edge to them. They were slightly less attainable for the masses as well. Of course, they were mass produced at this point. More so than they were in years previous. However, on the scale of 90s to now, you know, the mass production of shirts now is like nothing we've ever seen, which is why shirts you buy now, I don't think are going to hold their value into the years to come, because there are just so many of them out there. In the mid to late 90s, yes, they were mass produced, but not on that kind of scale. So they were still slightly less attainable, if you like. If your local shop didn't have the football shirt you wanted or didn't have it in your size, there was no logging online and getting them from Sports Direct or, you know, Classic Football Shirts or Adidas's website or whatever. You didn't do that. There was no such thing. You couldn't order these things online, or at least not, you know, for the majority. So they were in the shop or they weren't. And if they weren't, you couldn't have them, which I think maybe is why we love them so much now. You know, it's why we as adults now, those things that were unattainable for us back then, we have our disposable income now because we're adults. We can attain them and we can get them because there are places to go and get them. So maybe that's why we like our 90s shirts so much. You know, you always want what you can't have. We couldn't have them, but now we can. And there also wasn't such a market for fake football shirts back then. They existed, of course they did. But I remember seeing fake football shirts in, like, you know, the local market. And you could absolutely tell it was a fake football shirt. There was no debate. There was no, oh, is it, isn't it? I'll check the product codes. I'll check the stitching around the back. There was none of that. You knew it was a fake, so you just didn't get it. Or if you got it, you wore it knowing it was a fake. You know, there was no kind of in between. Obviously, places like Vinted and eBay, all of that weren't mainstream, didn't exist. So there wasn't really a market for fakes. And so we saw the shirts a lot. You know, we knew the shirts because we were watching a lot of football back then. All of us were. I think, this is my theory, I think we saw with our own eyes football shirts more back then than we do now. And here's my theory on this. We don't watch as much football these days. Generally, I think, I don't know the stats on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if football viewership is on the decline among the young. But even as with us as adults now, we don't all sit down and watch every game like we used to. We don't all sit down and watch Match of the Day like we used to. We sit and watch 3, 4, 5 minute highlight compilations on YouTube because our lives have changed and we're all busier now than we used to be in our lives. And so I think us, you know, who were there back then, I think we watch less football now. And we don't collect things like football stickers or, you know, bobbleheads or coins or any of these things. And all those things featured those shirts. So we were seeing the shirts all day, every day, pretty much. I don't think that's the case anymore. We all watched the games when they were on back in the day because it wasn't a case of, I'll catch the highlights on YouTube. If you missed the games that day, you didn't know when you were going to see them again. You might not see them again for years. You know, how mad is that? You know, there wasn't that instant access to football then like there is now. And I think that made us live more in the moment. You know, even the football stickers, you know, I don't know if kids do that anymore. I don't think they do. Yeah, I see them for sale in shops, but I never see, you know, you don't see groups of kids huddled around outside school like we used to do, where it was like, do you remember this? You know, we used to collect the Panini stickers, particularly for Premier League, you know, clubs. You would collect the stickers and you would get together with your mates outside the school gates or, you know, in the playground at break time or lunchtime, and you'd bring your stack of swapsies in and you'd all stand there and look for each other's collections. Got, need, put that one aside. And then you'd swap your 4 that they needed for the 4 that you needed from their pile, and you do your trades and all that kind of stuff. Swapsies, you know, got, need, all that sort of stuff. I actually thought one point of calling this podcast Got, Need. I thought that would have been quite a good name for those in the know, because that's what we used to say. I never collected stickers for World Cups, though. I only did it for Premier Leagues. World Cups, you just kind of immersed yourself in the games in a way that you didn't do with the Premier League. The World Cup, all the games were on, and so you just threw yourself in. And there was we're talking about shirts today. There were so many elite shirts at this World Cup, more so than any World Cup I've seen before or since. World Cup 2002 in Japan and South Korea had some excellent shirts. That was the start of the Nike Total 90 era. But for me, this World Cup, France 98, there were some absolute bangers, and we're going to go through them today. Is there any other place to start when talking about that exact thing? The Mexico shirt from that World Cup. You know the one I'm talking about, the green one with the Aztec patterning, that red and white trim, unbelievable shirt. The 2026 shirt that Mexico are going to be wearing at this year's World Cup in America, it's modeled on that. So if you didn't know the shirt from 1998, you're going to know it, because that's exactly what this year's shirt is modeled on. And it's, again, the new one looks great. The original, it was even better. And they had some legendary names as well. You think of Mexico at World Cups, you think of Blanco, you think of Hernandez, you think of Campos. Did you know that Rafael Marquez made his debut in the shirt at this World Cup? He was in that squad, which I can't believe, but I've fact-checked it, and he was there in the squad. I don't think he got a ton of minutes, but he was with the squad at this World Cup wearing this very shirt. And of course, you think of the Mexico shirt from France 98, you think of Blanco's bunny hop against South Korea. And everyone started doing this bunny hop where you trap the ball between your legs and you hop over the defender's tackle. Our PE teacher used to tell us this was an illegal move because he was trapping the ball between his feet, and so therefore it counts as obstruction. I've looked this up. I can't see any record of this actually being true. I think he was probably okay to get away with this. Although, I don't think you would be able to get away with this move in football these days, because for me, the game's changed. Well, not for me. The game has changed. I think now, and again, I've got nothing to back this up, but when I watch football now, I feel like you get less time on the ball now than you used to. Has anybody actually seen this move be attempted by anybody since, other than Blanco? Because I've got no memory of it, which is perhaps why it sticks in the head so much with Blanco doing it in this shirt, because we'd never seen it before, and weirdly, we've never seen it since, which maybe hints it is illegal. I don't know, someone let me know. But the Aztec design of this shirt is completely unique. Like, you haven't seen anything like it before or since. The color combos, I feel like they got the tone of green just right. It's the most Mexican green you've ever seen in your life. It works with the red and it works with the white. Those three together, of course, the colors of the Mexican flag. It's for me, it's football shirt perfection, or it's as close as you can get it at this World Cup. This shirt was manufactured by ABBA Sport. That's ABA Sport. And it was the only time they've ever done a World Cup shirt. So they really got it right. And that's, it's a bit like when, like the UK Office, they only did 2 series, and so it becomes even more iconic because there's only like 12 episodes to watch. ABBA Sport are the UK Office. They made one shirt and they made it a banger, and they left you wanting more, but they didn't give you more because that was the only one they ever did. I have a confession to make actually about this shirt before I go any further. I once thought I'd bought this shirt on Vinted for 20 quid. I was a little bit naive. I got told early in my football shirt collecting days that you could get really good cheap football shirts on Vinted and they were real. And so I logged on. So I'd never used Vinted before. Had a little look, saw it on there. Thought, well, I've been told they're real. So I bought it. I did no research. I just bought it and it came and it was quite clearly a fake. From the minute I opened it, you could see it. And so that's why you should always be very, very careful when buying on Vinted, because there are a lot of fakes out there. I'd love to get my hands on a real one of this shirt, maybe one day. They're very hard to come by. I've never seen anything like this on classic football shirts or any of those platforms. You sometimes see it on eBay, might be genuine, might not. We don't know. That's the thing. Buying shirts online is a bit of a risk. You've got to hope for a miracle if you want a real one of this shirt. However, even though it had the Aztec design in it, had the bright colours, I don't think it was the most outlandish shirt at this World Cup. I think that award goes to, of course, Croatia. Croatia with a surprise package of Euro 96, if you remember as well, 2 years previously. Davor Suker, the breakout star of that World Cup, he became a household name in part due to that unbelievable chip against Peter Schmeichel when they faced against Denmark. He won the Golden Boot at this World Cup as well. He carried that Euro 96 form into this World Cup. Croatia had an incredible supporting cast. They had Boban, Robert Jani, Slaven Bilic, Boksic, Prosinecki, household names among the 90s football fans of us that are remaining. We all remember these names from that World Cup and from that time period. This was their first World Cup as an independent nation following their split from Yugoslavia. They were in a very tough group as well. They had Japan, Argentina, and Jamaica in their group, all good sides in their own right. They went through the group convincingly. They beat Germany 3-0 in the quarterfinal. That was one of the biggest shocks of the World Cup, which got, it's their first World Cup. And they got to the semi-finals. I remember this result and I was thinking, is this the biggest knockout upset in World Cup history? And if not, what is the biggest upset in World Cup knockout history? Wrote down a few options. England 0, USA 1, 1950 World Cup. England were heavy favourites for the game. The USA were a team made up of actual amateurs. The game was in its infancy. It hadn't really progressed across to the United States in great number by that point. So they had a team of amateurs and they beat the inventors of the game, England, 1-0. Does it get bigger than that as an upset? Well, maybe it does, because 16 years later, the World Cup in 1966 in England, North Korea beating Italy 1-0 with a goal from the infamous Pak Duik. Italy were not just any old side. Italy were the defending champions of that World Cup and they lost to North Korea. It's got to be up there. And the defending champions came a cropper again in 2002 against Senegal, with France losing 1-0, of course, to Senegal in the opening game of that World Cup. France were the defending champions. Senegal were World Cup debutantes. They'd never played at a World Cup before. And that was the win that launched the careers of many a Senegalese name, Salif Diao, El Hadj Diouf, among others. But in 98, Croatia did beat Germany. They got to the semis, they lost the semi-final, and they ended up finishing third. They beat the Dutch in the third place playoff. I want to talk about third place playoffs because we've never done that, and I don't think many people do talk about them because, the bottom line is, who cares? Does anybody watching this or listening to this podcast actually bother with them? I don't ever watch them, even when England are in them, and they have been in them in recent years. I just think it's a pointless spectacle, if you can even call it a spectacle. Everybody involved wants to be at home. Both teams have lost their semi-final. They don't want to be there. It's an opportunity to give some players who didn't get any minutes in the games that mattered some minutes. And even they don't really want to be there because they know it means nothing. They'd all rather be at home with their families. They've been away from home for, 3 weeks to a month plus. They just want to go home. And so do we. I don't know why. Why did we do it? People forget that England have played these playoffs. Italia 90. After the game against West Germany, England played a third place playoff against Italy. They lost 2-1. And even in my time, World Cup 2018, after that game against Croatia, we played Belgium and we lost 2-0. I have zero memory of that. I actually found that out having researched third place playoffs for this podcast. I have no memory of it because I don't care. And I doubt many of you do either. That one in 2018 against Belgium, I looked at the starting 11 for England. Phil Jones and Fabian Delph started, and that kind of tells you everything you need to know, really. Do they even get a medal or like a trophy? I seem to remember when Croatia won their third place playoff at France 98, I seem to remember them having medals and a trophy. Surely not a trophy, because second place don't get a trophy. So it must have just been medals. It's a medal for the best loser. And nobody wants that medal. Not for me, Clive. Right, that was a relevant tangent. I was supposed to be talking about the Croatia shirt. Of course, you've got the red and white checkered one that they wore at that World Cup. For me, the best Croatia shirt at that World Cup was actually their away shirt. It's the blue, red and white checkered, clashy sort of mess of a shirt. And do you know what? That's why I love it. It's a mess. It shouldn't work. All the colours sort of clash with one another, but it's loud, it's baggy. And I don't know if it gets more 90s than this shirt. I'd love to get one. It doesn't get better than that for me. It's big, it's baggy, and it's brash. And that's what it's all about. Speaking of brash, we probably should talk about Brazil. It doesn't get any more brash than that. Their shirt at this World Cup was about as 90s as it gets. It's a classic, of course it is. And the shirt represents a bit of a change in the guard for Brazil. They'd won the World Cup in 94 with players like Romario and Bebeto taking centre stage, Dunga. Those players were on the way out. In came the new talent, if you like. You had Ronaldo taking centre stage, of course. You had Roberto Carlos. You had Rivaldo really coming in there. So it really was a changing of the guard. But watching Brazil for us as fans in the UK, it represented something slightly different, something exotic, if you will. Watching Ronaldo wear that shirt, gliding through defences, like a knife through butter, with the shirt sort of flapping around in the wind. They were baggy shirts. As a football fan here in the UK, that was a million miles away from the football that I was used to seeing in person. I was growing up in North Devon at the time. I was 9 years old when this World Cup rolled around. And my football experience was watching Plymouth Argyle in the sort of driving rain on trudgy, well-trodden, muddy pitches. This wasn't that. This represented something exciting, something exotic, something different, and I was here for it. And of course they didn't win that World Cup. Maybe they would have done had Ronaldo not had his medical episode pre-final, but maybe not. These things sometimes with football, there's the old adage that is, these things are written in the stars that France would do it in Paris in front of their home fans. And they did. And, Brazil didn't. They were champions 4 years previously. But for me, they were a lot easier on the eye than that 94 team. This young talent coming through, you knew they were there to stay. And of course, 4 years later, they would win the World Cup. So Ronaldo and co were not done yet. And they were not done yet in that beautiful shirt of theirs. Is it Nike's best ever shirt? That's a question that I'll pose. Maybe it is. Again, whenever you see those adverts from the 90s to do it, just do it and all that, often you're seeing this shirt to go alongside it. So I think they know that this was a good one. And we know it too. But it wasn't their, for me, it wasn't their peak. It wasn't peak Nike. Peak Nike for me came a little later, Total 90. The Total 90 era is very, very special. And when I think of Total 90, you do think of Brazil. But for me, I think of Arsenal, weirdly. And it pains me to say, because I'm not an Arsenal fan. You might gather that by what I'm wearing today. But the Arsenal shirts from that Total 90 era, they were special shirts. They had that burgundy one that they wore in their final season at Highbury. Of course, the red and white one with the O2 sponsor. It pains me that I can't wear one of those shirts because they're so good, those Arsenal shirts from that Total 90s era. I'd love to put one on, but I can't do it. I could own it. And here's a question for you. Here's a question for the chat. Would you own a shirt of a rival team if it was a shirt that you really liked, but you couldn't stand the team? Because I can't stand Arsenal, really, because for me, they're the old rivals, from the 90s and from the time that I, grew up in. Arsenal were the big rivals for titles. So I couldn't wear one of their shirts. But I love those shirts, those Total 90, 03, 04 era Arsenal shirts. I love them, but it feels a bit weird. Would you do it? Don't know if I can. But the Brazil shirt from that World Cup was up there for Nike. Nike had a few good ones at that World Cup, actually including the Holland shirt. People forget about this shirt, right? Because I actually don't think it's even the best Holland shirt of all time, but it was a good one. And if you're thinking which one, you've only got to think back to that Bergkamp goal against Argentina. That's the shirt I'm talking about. It was like an electric orange. It was almost high-vis sort of coloured. It was almost luminous orange, but with all of the detailing on the shirt was in black. It was very, very simple design, but it really worked. And it's become iconic because of what they did in the shirt, particularly that Bergkamp goal. That shirt was worn for one of the greatest goals in World Cup history. I remember watching that game, and even as a 9-year-old, you couldn't believe he'd sort of done that. Almost, it was 3 touches, wasn't it? It was the first touch to bring it out of the air, the second touch to bring it around the defender, and the third touch to bang it past Carlos Roa into the bottom corner, or into the top corner. Unbelievable goal. Dennis Bergkamp, for me, and again, it pains me to say this as a United fan, he's one of those players you just wish you had him in your team. And, if I could take any player from that Arsenal team and put him into United starting 11 back in the day, it would have been Dennis Bergkamp. Absolute genius. He reminds me of Cantona. Cantona was our Bergkamp and Bergkamp was your Cantona. That's how I feel about Bergkamp. He scored goals like you don't see. And I feel like anybody, and this is a little bit controversial, anybody can bang one in from 35 yards. I've done it. We've all done it when we've played 11 aside, mucking about with our mates. It can be done. You whack it, it goes in. It's a skill to do it repeatedly, but to do it once in a while, we can all do that. I feel like Bergkamp scored goals that no one else on earth can score. Eric Cantona had it. That goal against Sunderland, the chip, with the shimmy around the defenders, the pass to Brian McClare, who plays it back into his path, chips it over the keeper, and then the celebration. No one else can do that but Eric Cantona. And it's the same with Bergkamp. You look at his catalogue of goals that he scored over the years for Holland, but also for Arsenal, of course, for Arsenal. The goal against Leicester, very reminiscent of the goal that he scored in this Holland shirt, France 98. He took it out of the air, came inside, in it goes. And the same, the goal, of course, the goal against Newcastle. I've watched that goal, must be 1,000 times. I still can't work out how he does it. How does he score that? And that's the genius of the man. He sees the picture, before anyone else does. And long after everyone else has seen the goal, they still don't see the picture, but he saw it in that moment of pressure, and to do that against Argentina at the World Cup, he makes it look so easy. And that's the thing about this kit. That's why I like the kit. In a World Cup full of kits that have got outlandish designs and loud things going on, this Dutch kit kept things simple, a bit like Bergkamp did. I mean, there's so many shirts we could discuss. Of course, the France shirt was unbelievable. Almost bought that shirt once. It would have cost me 300 quid, and I was at the till at Classic Football Shirts ready to buy it. But then the guy behind the till told me they had a 92 Eric Cantona shirt out the back for the same price. So decisions were made and I left it behind. But that shirt is a classic as well. We've talked about it in previous podcasts, so I won't dwell on it too much now. One shirt that I did want to mention, though, is the England, I think it was the away shirt from that World Cup, the burgundy one, that they wore in the game against Colombia. I feel like England and Umbro back then, it was a winning combination every time. They were banging out shirt after shirt, and this was another classic. It reminds me of Beckham because of that free kick. Michael Owen comes to mind a bit with this one as well. Owen looked about 12, didn't he, at that World Cup? He really had no business playing in a men's World Cup at the age of 12, but there he was. The goal against Argentina, we of course remember. He was somehow 18. He genuinely looked about 12. Michael Owen's gone a little bit weird these days, hasn't he, sometimes with some of his takes. Have you heard that Michael Owen's only ever watched 4 films? Don't know if that's true, but that's apparently what he said once. Despite that, people actually forget how good Michael Owen was. At that age, to be tearing it up in the World Cup. What he did at club level means that he's not as loved as he perhaps should be by the masses. He kind of upset every fan base for every club that he played at, didn't he, really? Didn't endear himself to Liverpool fans because he ended up at United. United fans never really took to him because he used to play for Liverpool. He upset Newcastle fans massively because he just clearly didn't want to be there. I think he thought he was a little bigger than he was when he was playing at Stoke. And he just, no fan base loves him. And I think for that reason, we sort of forget him when we talk about the greats. But actually, Michael Owen always showed up in an England shirt. And, at World Cup, that's what matters. I'll tell you what I did have back in the day. My first computer game that I was ever given, any computer game ever, was Michael Owen's World League Soccer 99. I got given a PlayStation, the original PlayStation, when I was 10. And that was the first game I opened. And I played it on repeat every day for years. It was a long time until I moved on to FIFA and Pro Evo as well. I used to play that a little bit. But Michael Owen's World League Soccer 99. I'm going to have to play you this. Listen to this clip. Hold on a second. I'm just bringing it up now. Here we go. Listen to this unbelievably wooden delivery from Michael Owen. I mean, he was only 18. I should cut him a bit of slack, really. But listen to this. I mean, the theme music alone.
Welcome to Michael Owen's World League Soccer 99. Have fun.
You can see that he's just reading it off a piece of paper just off camera. It's so funny. I shouldn't mock him too much because then I'm just as bad as he was. And do you remember when Michael Owen did that sort of training video with a kid and he kept banging them in. And was it Neville Southall? Somebody was there training the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper was just like a 13-year-old. And Owen was just banging him in, and every time he was reeling away celebrating. And Neville Southall said to Michael Owen in the end, "Well done, he's 13." And that's kind of what I've just done with Michael Owen. So sorry, Michael. I thought the game was great. The commentator on that game was Peter Brackley. Remember Peter Brackley? I have no idea if Peter Brackley is alive still. Shall we have a look at that? He reminds me of Football Italia. I think of Peter Brackley, or when I do, not that I do all that often, I think of Football Italia on Channel 4 with, was it James Richardson sat in the piazza reading the paper? What a show that was, by the way. They should bring that back. Here we go, Peter Brackley. Okay, there's a little blurb here. Let's read this. Oh, as well as, right, so this is, I take it, if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to know who Peter Brackley is. As well as a successful broadcasting career, Brackley also carved a niche as a comedian and impressionist. He undertook several UK tours. Right, has anybody listening to this or watching this seen Peter Brackley on tour? Because according to the internet, he was a successful comedian. No, he carved a niche as a comedian and impressionist. Who was he doing impressions of? Did anybody say... Right, I'm begging you, if you saw Peter Brackley on tour as either a comedian or an impressionist, or both, ideally both, please get in touch. I want to hear stories. I want to know who he was impersonating. I hope he was impersonating James Richardson. Somewhere in there, we were talking about the best football shirts at France 98. So we should wrap that up. I think for me, if I've got to choose one, I'm not choosing Croatia because it's got slight picnic blanket vibes and it is a little bit crazy for me with the blue. I've got Brazil shirts in my collection already. So for me, if I could only own one shirt from France 98 and have the real deal in my collection, I'm going Mexico. Partly to save my vintage blushes. Right, now we come to a section of the pod called From the Stash, where I take a football shirt from my stash that I have here in my house and I talk about why I own it, why I'm wearing it. And today we're going to talk about this one that I've got on right here. This is actually not a football shirt, believe it or not. This is more of a fashion collab. You do see the players wearing this, I think, in warm-ups, pre-game. It's a bit of a training top as well, if you like. But it's a collaboration between Manchester United and, of course, the Stone Roses. One of Manchester's greatest ever exports. I got this from Classic Football Shirts for £110. There was a 20% discount on the shirt at the time of buying it, so it would have been slightly more expensive than that. It was a collab between the two, United and Stone Roses. I wonder how people feel about collaborations between football entities and non-football entities. They happen more often these days. They always create a bit of a sense of urgency as well among fans and among collectors, limited edition drops, all of that. And United went quite hard with this one. The players were wearing it pre-match, as I say. It was sent out to a lot of different influencers. Like I say, I wasn't one of those. I'd love to be on United's brand list, but I'm not on it. So I did pay for it myself. But they even had, I don't know if you saw this, but the stadium announcer at Old Trafford, a guy called Alan Keegan, who's been doing it for many, many years. He's the guy who will, come on the microphone and say, Manchester United goal scored by number 10, Wayne Rooney, that guy. If you can see him, he's based near the dugouts at Old Trafford. And even he, when they launched this, had it on. He had the sort of vibe of, an old guy who'd been bought some trendy clothes by his grandkids. I don't know if that's what made me want to buy it. I quite liked it anyway, but, Alan Keegan, fair play to you for getting involved. And the Stone Roses are Manchester icons, as I mentioned. They're one of Manchester's greatest ever exports. Madchester, all of that, the Hacienda, that kind of scene, that era, a special time for anybody who grew up there. I didn't. I'm not a Manchester United fan who's from Manchester, but I know many people who did grow up in Manchester who were around that scene. And they say it was such an exciting time. I mean, the 90s was anyway. And of course, the Stone Roses had their part to play within that. And the timing of the release, I don't know if this was pre-planned before the passing of Manny from the Stone Roses, which happened fairly recently. But, it felt quite appropriate that following his sad passing that this came out, and there was almost that celebration of his life and his work with the Stone Roses as well. I feel like I'm hearing their music a little more again these days, and Perhaps this shirt has something to do with it, but more so, I think, it's for Manny. It wasn't just this shirt they released. There was a zip-up top as well, and I think a bucket hat. I don't think I could pull the bucket hat off. The zip-up top was quite nice. You could get them from Adidas directly or from Classic Football Shirts as well. Must say, I was thinking about this. There's such an obvious collab waiting to happen that will surely one day happen between Manchester City and Oasis. And if that does happen, I've got a problem, because Oasis are by far and a long way, other than Queen, we can take Queen out of the equation, other than Queen, Oasis are my favourite band of all time. Rarely a day goes by that I don't listen to some Oasis. I love it. It's the soundtrack of my generation. It's the soundtrack of growing up in the 90s and the 2000s. I love it. I'm obsessed with it. And so I think if Oasis were to do a collab with Man City, that would be a problem. I wouldn't buy it, but it would be the closest I would ever come to buying something with Man City on it. I wouldn't do it, but I'd be tempted. Right, that is the end of the pod. Thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you so much for being patient with me in the last few weeks. I've had a lot of things going on personally. If you're a prayer, continue to pray for me, my family, my friends, and my general situation right now. I would really appreciate it. But the podcast will keep coming because I love doing it. I love spending time with you, talking about the good old days. What better is there to do? So thank you so much for listening again. I will be back for another pod soon. And in the meantime, if you love the shirt, don't forget to kiss the badge. See you next time.